Hey,
Hi, Scott.
how you holding up I assume you're at home as well.
Yeah, it's been kind of boring just studying for AP exams now.
Cool.
We'd actually met at the Harvard Business Academy last year, right? During the
Yeah,
summer.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and you gave a presentation about Luminopia, something I was really fascinated by. So, do you want
Awesome.
to start off by giving a brief background on Luminopia and what exactly your team is looking to achieve?
Yeah, sure. We founded the company about 4 years ago now. My co-founder and I were Harvard undergrads at the time,
Mhm.
and actually ultimately took time off to start this company full time. Our mission is really to create what we call captivating and rigorously developed digital therapeutics or digital treatments. And it's kind of this new field where technology, for a long time hasn't had that much of an impact within healthcare. It's disrupted a whole bunch of other industries, but it's kind of just starting to make its way into healthcare. And you're starting to see this emerging field of digital health. And within that, digital therapeutics and digital treatments are a big part of that. The idea that we can actually leverage technology, whether it's a mobile app, whether it's, in our case, it's a VR application, as an actual treatment for a condition. So that's kind of what we're working on. Specifically, our first product is a brand new treatment for the condition known as lazy eye. The scientific term is amblyopia. And the problem with lazy eye that we realized is that the standard of care treatments, the most common one is an eye patch, where you just cover one eye with a patch for multiple hours a day. It's really difficult to get kids to actually buy into that treatment and to do it. And that's what we call compliance within healthcare. So compliance is really low. Obviously, even if you have a treatment that works really well, if the patient doesn't do it, then you're not going to see good results. And that's kind of what we see in the real world. And so that's kind of what set us out on this mission to try and create something that was both effective but also engaging, knowing that compliance and being able to kind of get people to use it is a huge part of the challenge.
So, what do you think is the main problem with current treatments? Like you mentioned patching, right? Why do you think kids don't usually go with that treatment and they don't follow through?
Yeah, so I think it speaks to a larger challenge within the healthcare industry that we've seen is that, people in consumer and tech and entertainment spend so much time thinking about the user experience. And it's kind of the most important thing almost when it comes to developing a new product or a new business. I think within healthcare, unfortunately, the user experience is more of an afterthought. You don't have people that are itching to go see their doctor because it's so much fun. You go because you have to, and you take drugs because you have to. And in this case, you patch because you have to. And I think part of it is because, patching is unpleasant for everyone, but it's even more of a challenge because the patient population is mainly young children. So for lazy eye, it's mostly 4 to 12-year-olds. I don't know if you have younger siblings, but I'm sure it's a challenge to get them to do anything, right? But to get them to patch for 2 hours, 6 hours a day, and they have to go out and go to school. They have to, wear the patch in front of their friends. It's not a really compelling idea.
Mhm. So, how do you think Luminopia is actually addressing those issues, and why exactly is it a better alternative?
Yeah. So we kind of started with this premise that we need to create a treatment that's more engaging, and based off of that, if it works and if patients use it more, then we're going to see really, really good results out of that. So, first thing we did was we kind of brought together a bunch of the most well-renowned scientists and researchers in the field. Coming into it as young founders, I think that's a really important first step. So people like the chief of ophthalmology at Boston Children's Hospital, who has been one of our earliest advisors, has been with us kind of through the whole journey. And working with people like him, created this new device. It's a virtual reality-based therapeutic, and it allows you to take popular TV shows and movies and actually modify that into therapeutic visual input. And the idea with using media content is obviously everyone knows that people love watching TV, and it's one of the most engaging things out there. People had taken interesting approaches in the past of using video games as a way to make lazy eye treatment more fun. And the issue we saw with the video game path was that unless you can develop a video game for every age group and for every gender and for every interest group, it's really difficult to hold people's engagement. There was an example of a Tetris game that people had studied, and it works great for the first week or so, but after that, obviously, getting a 7-year-old to play Tetris over and over and over again is also a challenge. So the approach of using media content, the idea was that we could give people the choice of what they want to watch. And to do that, we actually licensed about 700 hours of content from people like DreamWorks and Nickelodeon and PBS and NBC. So the idea is that the kids and the patients are really watching whatever they would watch on TV. We're just asking them to do that in a headset, and we actually apply these dynamic modifications in real time to the content so that it encourages weaker eye usage and that it actually treats the condition.
So how did this idea actually originate? Like, where did you end up meeting all the other co-founders?
Yeah, so I met my co-founder, Dean, actually during the visiting weekend at Harvard. So that was quite a coincidence. He was one of the first people I met, and spent a lot of time in the fall of freshman year, talking startup ideas and talking entrepreneurship. And for us, we always wanted to start a company, but kind of the mission and the why was really important. There's so many startups out there nowadays, and everybody, obviously sees the potential for startups as a driver of innovation. But, we didn't want to create something that wasn't immediately kind of impactful or tangibly impactful. So this idea of digital health kind of coming back to this field was really interesting because it's obviously really easy to see benefit and impact within healthcare, right? You're literally improving people's lives and improving their health. Dean had a bit of a visual condition in his past as a professional skier. We also had a friend who actually went through lazy eye growing up and went through patching growing up. So that's kind of what triggered our interest in getting to know the condition a bit more. And I mentioned, there were kind of a lot of different approaches that people had taken to try and make treatment more fun and more engaging, but we just felt that they weren't quite there yet. The video game approach wasn't quite good enough, and our thought was we could kind of take this to the next level by creating this library of content people could choose from, and then also, within a VR platform, which is kind of perfect for this use case because you just need to separate input between the eyes.
So based on the clinical trials that you've conducted so far, one of which was Boston Children's Hospital, how long do you think it will take till you get FDA approval? And are there any other challenges that your team is facing at the moment?
Yeah, so it's definitely a long process, but we've gone through quite a lot of it by now. We've actually run multiple pilot studies, and some of those data have been presented at the American Academy of Pediatric Ophthalmology, which is kind of the big conference for doctors in this field. We've been running a nationwide randomized controlled trial for the last year and a half, and that's actually going to be wrapping up in the coming months. And that study was designed working with reviewers at the FDA, as well as some key opinion leaders in the field. So, provided things go well, we're actually looking at being able to submit to the FDA relatively soon, call it later this year. And, depending on how long the review process takes, could be looking at approval early next year.
Great. So another thing was, I've noticed that there tends to be a misconception when it comes to VR and how it's only applicable to like the entertainment industry. So do you want to take this time to maybe bring up the success your team has had in partnering up with like leading media companies? You mentioned PBS, and where exactly is the company headed onwards from now?
Sure, yeah. So I think VR is really interesting because it's this weird space where everyone is very excited about the potential, but to be honest, it hasn't really manifested yet. I think if you ask people that are both in the field and looking at the field, everyone feels that we haven't really found that killer use case where VR can take off like the smartphone took off or something like that. So I think it's really interesting to look at VR applications in healthcare because, our experience is that it is probably a stickier use case than maybe even entertainment or gaming and stuff like that. The problem that you run into with the VR work and gaming is that unless you have, say, millions of people with headsets that can all play the same game together, it's really difficult to kind of convince someone to buy into an ecosystem that's just getting started. and that's true even with the library of games available. But with these VR applications in healthcare, like what we're working on, you're using VR because it's the perfect platform and the perfect technology for whatever you want to do. So in this case, it's about presenting input differently to each eye, so it becomes the perfect platform. And the flip side of that is that it's the most it's the ideal platform to do this as well. So it becomes a very tangible and compelling use case. I think that's true with other work going on in the VR healthcare space as well. There's work going on relating to healthcare worker training in VR. There's work going on relating to pain management and relaxation techniques with VR, surgical use cases. I think those are all really interesting because they're it's much more clear why you need the platform and why you need the technology. In terms of where we're going next, a lot of it is still in stealth, so I can't talk too much about it. But we're definitely kind of still at this nexus of how can we take problems within healthcare and kind of create more engaging experiences around it, because we really feel that we've seen, with our Lazy Eye product, that if you can engage people to their health, then that drives huge outcomes and is actually a very important factor in success of treatment. So we're kind of focused on what are the next applications within that thesis.
That's great. So do you have any piece of advice for aspiring entrepreneurs, maybe something about product development or how to go about finding angel investors?
Yeah. Lots of thoughts for sure. I think, the first thing I would say is from a personal standpoint of kind of figuring out if you want to go into entrepreneurship. I think that, my experience has been, even if everything from today onwards just fails, I would not regret any of it. And I think that it is among the best ways to learn just, across the board, whether it's learning about a specific field like healthcare, whether it's learning about how to hire people and manage people, whether it's learning about, how leading teams works and how, software development works. Just diving right in and kind of holding your feet to the fire, I think is the best way to do it. So I think, no matter what happens in your journey, you'll come away with a very, very valuable experience. So I think that's probably the first thing. I think the second thing, in terms of product development, I think that the key, especially for early stage startups and especially for, first time entrepreneurs, is it's really all about learning. How quickly can you learn about your product and whether it is going to succeed? Whether that be just getting out there and talking to people about it, talking to users, talking even to peers and friends who can give some thoughts as to whether this is a good idea. And then figuring out, what is really the simplest version of the product we can develop that can show some traction, that we can go out there and test, that we can kind of get some more information on.
Do you have any last words, something you want people to know about your mission?
Yeah, I think the last thing I would say is that I think when it comes to entrepreneurship, I think the spirit of it, at least for me and for my co-founder, is that, it's an opportunity to make the world a better place and create something that's your own. And I think, when you're going through the process of thinking of ideas and thinking of, what you want to spend your time on, I would also really think about, how do you think you can create impact? I think it's one thing to create a successful business, and that's, very difficult and admirable, but I think it's just so much more rewarding when you can create a successful business where you see the impact and you can walk away knowing that you made a pretty big difference.
Thank you so much, Scott. It really means a lot that you took the time to talk, and can't wait to Luminopia is headed next. Definitely follow up on your success.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, happy to help. And this seems like a great project. So congratulations on your work as well.
Thank you. All right, Scott.
Awesome.
Bye.
I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.